we had done that earlier, but I guess like.
It should be straight. No problem. So we're right. So you're right. Yeah. You're okay with that? Yeah. Ready to go.
We're together, but not like, you know.
Good morning. It's 9:04 a.m. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting of the IURA board to order. We'll note the absence of board member Donna Fleming, who is informed staff and the board and has an excused absence. We'll turn to agenda additions or deletions. Any from staff?
None from staff, no.
All right, moving on. Any public comment received?
None received.
Thank you. And then a review of the minutes in our agenda packet. May I have someone please move those minutes? Moved by Cheyenne, seconded by Siobhan. Any discussion of the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption? And that carries 4-0. Turn it over to the governance committee.
So usually Donna would
Which
take
is
the lead
Donna,
here,
right? Yeah.
But I can.
I will turn it over to Nels.
So this is all, the topic here is the 2026 budget, and to kind of introduce that and get started on some of the financials, the first page, 17 of your PDF, is the bank account analysis. So this is really more our cash accounts to tell us kind of where our position is at a point in time at the end of August. And it shows our major cash accounts at a similar snapshot time over the last 3 years. So you can see the trend line. The trend line is positive. We have more cash than we had 2 years ago. But some of these accounts are very restricted and some are more flexible. So it's important to understand that that component. And so just to quickly go through the 7 accounts, the operating accounts are checking account, very flexible. The CD revolving loan fund is our economic development loan fund category. It does do a few other things as well, but that's the primary use of those funds. The CD revolving loan fund section 17 is a legacy account from back 20 years ago, which is at one time the agency designated to be used for CD revolving loan fund activities, but the IRA has the authority to do, change that as long as the use of those funds is consistent with the CDBG regulations.
Mhm.
Industrial park account is Cherry Street and Carpenter Business Park, and that's local and flexible for the agency on how it wants to use those funds. The UDAG account is the closeout funds from the Urban Development Action Grant, which was kind of the Center Ithaca project, probably was the primary source of those funds. Those are federally restricted funds, but less restrictive than CDBG. They only have to be used for community development activities, quote unquote. They don't have the low mod benefit test attached to them. And then the HODAG funds is the remnants from the Eddygate project, the Housing Development Action Grant. Eddygate was the Collegetown project next to the Dryden Garage. And that has to be, that money is restricted for use for affordable rental housing projects. And then finally, the 05 account, as we call it, the non-CDBG account, is our flexible fund, which is a fund we've been trying to grow to provide us with flexibility and also as kind of our, in some respects, it's kind of our fund balance account, I guess, in thinking about it. It's local funds that we have a lot of flexibility use, and we do go to that fund for a lot of uses. Money goes in and money goes out. We're trying. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was closer to 250,000, so it's up to 490. However, it's down from where it was a high of the last 2 years, and that's a function of us drawing funds from that account to pay for IRA staff related activities when we don't have an account to bill that money to anywhere else. So we just want to give you a sense of those accounts. The one restriction of the local funds I talked about, the ones that are not federally restricted, is based on the public authorities law, we cannot make grants or loans with those funds. We can use them for internal purposes. We can buy land with it. We can do leases. We can do certain creative activities, but we cannot use those funds for grants or loans. Kind of quirky, but that's the way the law is set up, because, and that's because our enabling legislation didn't explicitly authorize the IRA to make loans and grants. That's the rationale for why that restriction is there. So, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Carl. For line 11004 and 11007, those are the ones you're just referring to?
Those are federally restricted. Those are the revolving loan fund categories. The ones that have the prohibition on loans or grants are the operating account, number 1,
Mhm,
the industrial park account, number 14, is
I see.
and the non-CDBG account.
On the non-CDBG, okay. So,
Every account either has federal restrictions or it has that prohibition against loans and grants. It's one way
Okay.
of thinking about it.
so, what is the process for actually using or distributing the, let's just start with the federal lines.
When somebody applies for a loan, we draw from that fund. Essentially, if we have cash in that account, the CD revolving loan fund. So, and another example is just recently, John Guttridge had come forward with a request to assist the project at 123 South Cuga Street to convert the upper stories from offices to residential apartments. And that was that's a HODAG eligible use. So we will be drawing 300,000 from that HODAG account for that loan. So basically, the agency is approving activities to withdraw funds from those federally restricted activities.
What's the process for evaluating the loan requests and and people knowing that the money is out there and everything?
The process is we have a economic development revolving loan fund policy, which establishes the criteria and the considerations. It is pretty open to a lot of, it's not, you must hit everything. It's consider the risk of the project and the community benefit, essentially. It's a framework for that. In terms of knowledge of the funds out there, we do list it on our website. We've worked closely with the Downtown Ithaca Alliance, the Economic Development Planner has been active, and that we get word out to the local lenders. Ithaca is very well serviced by local banks and lenders. We have a lot of competition, but when they find a project that they can't fully fund, they come to us and say, this project, we can't fund this project fully, or we can't fund it at all. And they direct them towards us in those cases.
Mhm.
That's the short
And the
answer.
Economic Development Committee reviews them? or-
Yes, right. Yeah, they basically act as a loan review committee and bring a recommendation to the IURA on those loans.
Okay, thank you.
So just a framework, that's just to give you a background of our cash accounts, which is not really the direct focus of the 2026 budget, but just to show that there are some resources as assets, and the budget's going to kind of look at future expenses and future revenues. The next page is page 18 of your PDF, and one focus, it looks a lot like our budget, but it's actually the budget to actual. So it's kind of looking at this year's budget and how are we doing relative to what we budgeted. So you'll see kind of a green column, which is the year to date as of August 31st. And the yellow column is what we adopted in terms of the budget. And you can, ideally, everything would be exactly at 67% of expenditures because August is, 2/3 of the way through the year. And you can see on the expenditure side, we're good. We have a couple of categories where we're over 67, but there's a good reason for it. One example is the contractors line. We didn't budget in our last year's budget for the auditor expense, and we incurred that auditor expense, but the city has agreed to reimburse us for it. So yes, we're maybe expending that a little quicker than we would have normally, but that will wash out at the end. But the big issue, like the city, is the money's in the staff. It's the staff expenses, and we're right on line or under for the staff expenses, which make up 87% of our budget. So it's just to show you that our budget to actual is looking good in 2025 on target. The next page is another budget to actual, looking at the revenue side. But if you have questions, stop me anytime.
I apologize for being late. The reimbursement for the audit expense, I don't know if guaranteed is the right word, but can that be clawed back, or is that set to come to us?
Well, we pay it out when we get billed, and then we reimburse it, and it's been authorized to be reimbursed by retaining funds that would be flowing from the IRA to the city. Like, for example, we collect rent at Steamboat Landing for the farmer's market, and once a year we pass it on to the city. So we'll just subtract the cost of the audit, which will then be rolled into the city's audit because they use that audit work as part of the city audit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget to actual expenditures? Let's take a look at the budget to actual revenues. This is where there's a little bit of deviation. So, so you can see that I've identified kind of the major categories of revenues, and the major one has been HUD entitlement grant administration funding, and we're on target with that one. But we're a little low on our. Let me just get down and get, the big one is really the property disposition, urban renewal revenues is running low from where we wanted it to be, as well as the home ARP one-time revenues. So you see the second one at 50,000 was projected. We're only at 9,000 for home ARP. And then down below under property disposition and urban renewal revenues, I projected 84,000 for the year. We're at 12,700, so we're way below on those. And the reason for both of those is, for one, home ARP got a little bit of a late start. We're now starting to build more to it than we have. Reach has been working with the 211 to line up participants. They've just housed the first two persons who were unhoused. And we're starting to see vouchers come. So that's going to ramp up the last 2 months of the year. I don't know if we're going to get to 50,000 though. So I think I overestimated that we were going to get that going a little quicker. The good news is that money will just roll over in the home ARP, whatever isn't spent this year. It's still another revenue for next year. In terms of the property disposition, I was anticipating when we developed the budget for 2025 that Inlet Island was going to advance. It didn't advance. And that's why that number is much lower than anticipated. So that's where our revenues are falling. That's really the reason why that 05 account on the bank balance was less, has been drawn down a little bit, because we have to draw down funds for staff time from somewhere. And if we can't have an account to bill it to, it comes out of the 05 account. So that explains that prior bank balance issue as well.
So now, what are we, well, first of all, this is just like a clarifying, because I'm sorry that I forget, is the fiscal year is
Calendar year.
the calendar year? Okay. So what do we expect then for that property disposition line? Like for the balance of the year?
It's going to lag. We're not going to make up. We're going to be 50,000 down, probably.
And this ties a bit into, I think, an issue you raised a little bit later, I'm sure we're going to talk about, which is increasing income. The property leases, which is the Cherry Street, well, we'll see at the end where we look at the lease report. Are the leases we charge comparable to commercial leases, or do we consciously make them less so that they're more affordable?
Most of our leases no longer are with Cherry Street anymore. Those were all set up as primarily, well, they were subsidized leases with the right for the buyer to buy out the lease after 20 years. So they were designed to cover the initial acquisition cost by the city and IRA of that land when it was in a raw state, I guess, maybe. Or maybe after the road was laid out, because they were tied to the assessed value at the time they purchased the property. So that was the way we determined the lease rate. But every one of those buyers was required to build a building and create jobs. So that was the real public benefit associated with that. And the leases that we now carry on are really mostly on the two major ones. We have the lease of the ground floor of the Cougar Garage, which is a market rate lease, kind of, because we were leasing it out as a cold, dark space with no, it was just a concrete enclosure, no heat, no interior finish. none of that. And so that was leased at $3 a square foot back in 2004 with a CPI increase every year to the master developer, who then created, outfitted the space for Cultivari and Merrill Lynch, and invested in that. So that's relatively a market rate lease. We also lease out the air rights to the garage. Again, that was more of a negotiated number because it's kind of a internal partnership project, but it was intended to reimburse the IRA for its expenses associated with that garage. And then we do several leases on behalf of the city, such as the downtown Ithaca Child Care Center, the Steamboat Landing site. It was, there was ribs, those kind of projects. We collect money for those, but reimburse that back to the city. So those don't really net us out anything other than an administrative fee. So we don't have a lot of new lease revenue coming in. Okay. Ready to roll on to the 2026 budget proposal. So you should have a memo on page 20 of your PDF talking about a brief memo that we reviewed with the committee. Basically, the summary of that is that our expense side is at a proposed increase of less than 1%. So that would be well controlling expenses. That includes a 3% increase for staff, similar to what the comparable city staff are raising, and that helps keep us in line with inflation. The committee checked to see where do IRA salaries relate to inflation impacts and comparable positions. So I think it retains competitiveness for us to seek out to make sure we have an opening, we can fill it with a good candidate. The challenge though is on the revenue side, because the extended time period of flat funding or reduced funding for CDBG and home combined with inflation has created a challenge for us in terms of covering our budget. We're almost all staff, so we're 3.63 staff, full-time equivalent, and the budget funding there would maintain, current staff. There would be no change in our capacity. So on the expenditure side, I think we're doing a good job relatively, but it's, almost all staff expenses. It's not there. We don't have a lot of other expenses to worry about. The budget does include $10,000 to continue to do the work on Inlet Island to get that ready for development proposals. But the revenue side is starting to pinch, and we don't have, we have some one-time funding from the Home ARP program, which we talked about briefly about, we had 50,000 in this budget. We probably won't use that 50,000 in revenue. We think we will expend 50,000 next year, and then the following year will be our final year of that funding in 2027. So we'll have, that's a plus for these next 2 years, but then it goes away because it's a one-time funding source. So we need to look at where we can find more revenue, or to balance a budget, or to reduce expenses. And I'm suggesting that probably our strategies are ones that we are familiar to the Urban Renewal Agency. I mean, we try to look for urban renewal projects that we can expand community benefits with, and also generate some revenue. So that's like Inlet Island, Cherry Street development, maybe Seneca Garage issue is being discussed by the city, is thinking about the future of that, or some other new opportunity. Maybe there's some housing project up there that we can help look at. We can look at new grants and new loans. The more we can grow loans, that's one of our positive areas where we've been increasing our revenue. We can draw a small portion of that loan to support the agency. So more loans are helpful for us. And we do have some assets in our bank accounts, so we have some resources to make loans with. And then the third one is working with the city on joint kind of an agreement to be reimbursed for the services of the IRA staff when working on joint projects. And we've made some good progress with that concept. And I think I've budgeted $30,000 in our next year budget, thinking that that's going to work out to provide some resources in terms of some of the joint activities that we work on, or will be working on. Right now, there's a gap in the economic development planner position. That might be one opportunity. And there's a lot of other joint areas where we work together. So I think those are the three areas that come to mind for me on where we can make some differences. The big one probably is realistically Cherry Street or Inlet Island, because those are bigger scale projects and they could produce a stream of income going forward. But I think all three of them need to be part of the mix really as we look forward. I think you could think about our kind of relatively modest operating deficits as kind of an investment in the future to get these things ready and work on them. But if they don't come to fruition on a regular basis, eventually we're out of balance between our budget and our revenues. So it's about a $36,000 operating deficit I'm projecting in 2026. But if we're making progress on some of these other projects, that we can weather that. But long-term, the federal funding picture is not optimistic at the current time. And that I'm assuming that there will continue to be a CDBG and home program for the foreseeable future. Right now, we work our budget on last year's allocation. So we have our 2025 grant in place, and that's what we'll be spending in 2026. So we're good for 1 year on that, but it's certainly uncertain where the federal picture is going to be as well, another risk element. So historically, the agency has adopted the expenditure side of the budget and understood the revenue projections, but we haven't formally adopted the revenue side in the past. It's up to you whether you want to go that way. We'll be tracking it either way, but the recommendation of the committee was to approve the budget as presented at less than 1% increase for 2026.
Can you just explain that to me? So you're not really proposing the budget to the board, you're proposing just the expenses to the board?
Well, what we submit to PAL, which is due November 1st, is the expenditure side. They don't.
What's PAL?
Oh, sorry, Public Authorities Group. That's the state group that regulates all public authorities in the state. So through the Public Authorities Law, that's why I call it PAL, the short name for it. But so what we submit to them is the expenditure budget. They don't request revenue budgets. They just request the expenditure budget to be submitted and posted on their website. So that's what we've been submitted, and we can go either way. I don't have a particular challenge. We won't submit the revenue side to them, whether we adopt it locally or not, but the revenues are more projections, whereas the budget is really what we will adopt and stick to, and the revenues are a little harder to project when they're not completely under our control, I guess. That's all. Where we can control expenditures realistically.
So this sort of explains why there isn't like a single document that has expenses and revenue on it with a net deficiency. Like the summary contains all of the things that you just said, but there isn't like what one would traditionally think of as like a full budget for the fiscal year.
Yeah, and
Because PALS doesn't need
part
it.
of that is because, yeah, right, for one, but part of that is the interconnection between revenue coming in and cash in our account. So when we have, a good example would be that when the housing project next to the parking garage, the white rental housing project, we sold that property to the developer for that housing purposes, and we took back a loan. We issued it as a loan, and they were going to pay back that loan at a 7% rate for the next 20 years. And so we had a stream of revenue coming in that we built into our budget then as revenue coming in. Then they decided they were going to sell that building, so they paid off the loan. So the balance went into our bank account and it stopped flowing as revenue. So, if you just looked at that as on an annual basis, you would think, oh, we lost our revenue stream, but realistically, it was a lump sum that was deposited in our bank account. So there's that interrelationship between the income stream and cash received, from a sale, which is still eligible for use of administrative expenses. And in fact, again, I said we grew that 05 account partially by those kind of issues that came up. Somebody was paying us a loan, paid off the loan, and it went into our 05 account. So that's why it's a little it's kind of an operating deficit, but of course, if you look back 8 years ago when that sale occurred, that money could have been, we could have artificially continued to have that draw from that account saying, well, we were going to get $10,000 a year from that loan repayment. It's now in our bank account. Should we draw $10,000 a year from that bank account into our operating budget? I mean, that's kind of the question that it raises in my mind of how to treat that. So I guess that's part of the reason why we haven't really created that kind of budget the same way as you might see, like, here's our expenses and here are our revenues, because we can draw from those bank accounts. And in fact, it's probably appropriate when we've had some lump sum payments to draw from those.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm assuming when the IURA is audited, that they also don't need a budget. Usually the auditor.
They're really more looking,
budgets.
they're looking at assets and liabilities as well as kind of the change in flow of funds. They don't, they look to see, they look at the adopted budget and see if our expenses are in line with our adopted budget and raise questions if there's some major deviations. But they don't really look at the revenue side the same way. They don't raise those issues. They do look at the overall picture and say, you know, is this agency, you know, on a trend line in a certain direction, and raise concerns, you know, if they think there is a concern. But they have not raised that concern for the agency in terms of, like, you'll see some not-for-profit agencies audited and they raise a concern like ability to continue to operate kind of question is raised in an audit sometimes.
I'm not actually concerned about our soundness. I'm more just wondering about, I mean, because there are accounting mechanisms for when like assets change their features from like a stock to a flow and stuff like that. So I was just wondering about, that does explain why we don't have, like, it's only in the language of your memo that we see the deficiency, because otherwise you can't see it.
Although the last page of the budget is kind of the revenue portion there, which is, I mean, it's in a exhibit.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that summary of projected revenues, and it shows, it comes up to around 430,000 when our expense side comes up to 465,000. So you can see the difference there, but it's not all on one page, like you said.
Yeah, I'm used to seeing budgets. That's how I'm used to seeing budgets. But I understand why, if nobody else is asking for it, then there's isn't just, I guess, a reason to make it.
The other thing is, until last year, we always had a surplus of revenue coming in over expenses. So there was never really a reason to worry about that, because the funds from HUD and CDBG and other resources was higher than our expenditure side. Now we're facing a newer.
Yeah,
more.
that might be a reason. I really don't like this phrase. It's so corporate, but moving forward, so that we can track as we move into these sort of more lean federally funded years, so that we could track like what the expectations are for the year in terms of those overall balances. Because if we have many years of in a surplus, and then I'm not worried about the soundness, but the sort of documentation of the planning, I think, can be helpful for understanding, okay, we know that we have this deficit, we have a planned deficit, but we also know how we're going to back it because we have these other funds. But like having regularly organized documentation will help us see, like, well, year after year, are we still going to have to go back to those particular funds, or what would be, the other arrangements? So just
Agreed.
a suggestion in terms of the formatting of the documents. I mean, it's not uncommon for many organizations for revenue streams to change in their classification, or the expenditures to change in the classification.
Yeah.
I know that we're talking about Inlet Island as a space that could potentially generate some more revenue if we're to move forward with like development processes with it. And that we've talked about a few next steps of like what it might take to get that site ready to like reissue an RFP and think about that. Do you have any thoughts on like what the timeline of that might look like for this next year and like when there might be staff time and funding available to work towards that?
Yeah, we actually had somebody indicate some interest as a developer or a purchaser come forward unsolicited. So yeah, that's timely. We ordered survey work to document the land swap proposed between the DEC and the city to facilitate dredging as well as a transfer of property to the city that would then be available for redevelopment. That survey got stuck in, I think, flood issues or something. I don't know, but I just talked to TG Miller yesterday and they said they've finished the field work. They're finalizing the survey work. It's been literally months. But that is the first step, is to advance that transfer and document so that when we talk with the developer, we can say, yes, this is the development site and it includes what was formerly city property and it excludes maybe an easement somewhere else. So they wouldn't have to worry about that issue. They'd have some clarity on the properties. And then secondly was to do some preliminary investigation or identification of the brownfield site and what would be kind of a ballpark cost estimate for somebody to remediate that site. There's on the city-owned property, just south of the Coast Guard auxiliary property, is a known brownfield where there was bulk fuel storage historically. So it was thought that it would be helpful to help define that a little bit so a developer would have some understanding of what they're facing, because there are no further state programs for the city or the IRA to do brownfield cleanups with any subsidy right now. So really the most cost-effective way is for a developer to go through the brownfield cleanup program. It isn't a great program. It doesn't have deep subsidies, but it does provide some. It does have, the most important thing is it has an indemnification waiver so that if there ever is an environmental contamination issue that arises after the fact of the cleanup, the property owner is indemnified by the state. And so therefore a lender will make a loan, will be more likely to make a loan on that property than if without that indemnification. So those are the two issues working on. So I think the survey is going to be ready in the next 2 weeks. Then we can go get that, go to the appraiser to appraise the properties, and then the state can make theirs, then it goes to the state for their process for making the transfers, which is probably not a, not a 3-week process, probably a 3 to 6 month process. And meanwhile, we can do the environmental analysis while that's going on. So I think by fall of 2026, really, if you're thinking about it, summer, fall of 2026, we could advance that at some point if a developer was willing to take on the risk of some unknowns. But that would be when we think we would have be able to define things better on that.
Are we allowed to sell to a developer, as you said, someone expressed interest, or are we required to open the process up to bids?
Urban renewal law does not require a competitive bid process or public. Historically, we have usually gone through that route of opening it up to the general public to look at, those things. There have been cases where there was like an adjacent property owner where it just made sense to work with that adjacent property owner, and issues where there was a transfer of property. But that's a choice of the agency, how to proceed with that.
Yeah, I could see, especially in that area, that there would be a great deal of public interest
I agree.
in the development there. So,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm sorry, I just want to double check my understanding. Are we talking about the area that we had some interest in before that turned out to not work out?
Correct. Yeah. Basically north of the Route 89 bridge
Yeah.
on Inland Island.
So it didn't work out, but what you're saying is before trying to figure out a way for it to work out again, there's this lengthy process that we're going to go through in order to sort of, is the background is so that we can mitigate some of the reasons why that didn't work out?
Right. Yeah. And give less and more certainty to what the site is going to be. And what the state's impact is going to be with dredging when they go forward with the dredge project, which we think is 2027, 2026, 2026, 27. But yes, eliminate some of the uncertainties of the site, which, and clarify what's, how to address that brownfield site and what is the boundaries of the site that's available for redevelopment.
So then it sounds like that potential revenues from that site are not, we wouldn't even expect those to come in until 2027.
Correct.
So they're not a site of potential amelioration of the 33K deficit.
36K, yeah.
36.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree. That's a longer term project, and all those urban renewal projects go through the agency, they go to the common council. Then once they're approved, they still have to go through bank financing and a property sale process. It's not a short-term process in most cases. There's rare cases where things are just ready to go, but it'll take a while. So that's why we may have to think about our operating deficit as an investment towards a future outcome where there'll be some more revenue coming back.
Different properties. Do we, if you can remind me, do we still own the 2 small parcels at the tuning fork? You know, they're planted with flowers now. They're very small.
Well, no, we own one of those.
One, okay.
We own the one close to.
What are we talking
Okay,
about?
so this is a traffic island next to CSMA, Community
Yeah.
School of Music and
Yeah.
Art. It's got a pump, a sculpture, some nice landscaping on it. It's kind of a triangular shaped parcel.
So we own the smaller one.
We own that one, yes,
Okay.
and it's assessed at $1,000 value. And
No, I was,
and
no, right. You couldn't build anything there.
frankly, I've been working with the city attorney's office to try to transfer it to the city because we have to pay for stormwater fee in the property and sidewalk fees. So we're net negative on owning that property. I want to get out of it.
You know, what I was thinking,
Unless you've got a use for it.
well, lease it to some commercial entity and they could have a nice small sign that says, you know, maintained by, you know, Carl's Ice Cream, you know? So
We could look at that opportunity.
it would be a lot of money, but
I mean, we have been using it as a traffic island and a landscaping beautification, but you're right, there's no commercialization. There's a sculpture on there. And I think it is one of the major water sources for landscaping in that area, but we could look at a more creative option. Yeah, it's true. It came to us as a remnant parcel of the urban renewal of the Tuning Fork Transportation Project. So, yeah, I presume the city owns the other one. I don't know how that worked out, why we got one and not the other.
You mean the one across from the city center, like?
Yeah, the other one, the other. If you want to pursue something different, let me know, because I have been talking with Victor at city attorney about like,
Getting rid
get
of
it out from under us because it's just costing us money every year.
tiny house would fit there.
It might, how you get there, plenty of street frontage. So anyway, the committee recommended the budget be adopted as presented, just so, and there is a resolution somewhere floating around in your
Page 22.
there you go.
Just because I'm annoying, I think saying the expenditure budget is more accurate,
Sure.
right?
Or you can adopt it with the revenues as projected is fine too.
Yeah.
Whatever your preference is.
Needing to pick one of them, I will move as written with the following change. Resolve that the IURA hereby adopts the FY 2026 IURA administrative expenditure budget dated 10/7/25. Is there a second? Seconded by Cheyenne. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those oh, well, so unanimous, yes. Okay, that carries 4-0. Our next is,
And my laptop has lost power and it is a pain to plug it in. So I'm just using my phone instead. So I'm not multitasking. I'm just using my phone.
oh, I
because
thought you
my
had one of those scrolling screens.
I am because I'm
But-
using my phone
I
because
do have an extension cord.
at this point, it's just another one of the features of our modern city infrastructure.
We'll move on to the annual review of the mission statement. Just for discussion purposes, I'll move as written. Is there a second? Seconded by Siobhan. Discussion on this.
That was with no change from the prior year.
With that, all those in favor of adoption, that carries unanimously. And then I'll turn it back over to Nels for any discussion of the board self-evaluation form.
Public authorities law requires the board to annually do a self-evaluation form. And so this is their template form. It was modified modestly in prior years to add the other comments at the bottom. Otherwise, it's their standard form for the most part, which is, one size fits all. The committee thought that it's a difficult criteria to sort through in many respects for some of these things, but they also didn't feel that they had the bandwidth to really dig into it. So they thought, let's just bring it forward one more year and we can work incrementally to make improvements and clarifications as it relates to the IRA board, because this is the same board evaluation criteria they use for the New York State Thruway and for others, all sorts of public authorities.
I hope we're scoring better than the throughway.
So they're recommending to continue this, the evaluation form as it was last year and present it in your packet. And then we will be, if adopted, we will ask you at some point to self-score yourself and bring it back to the governance committee for their consideration, and then bring their discussion to the full IRA probably in February or something like that.
Is there a formal motion for us to adopt though, or is this just
It's a review because
nothing's changed?
there's no formal requirement to change it, but we will, unless otherwise
Got it.
corrected, we'll keep with this form.
Carl,
So we're going to receive a written or electronic fillable copy of?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't believe it's been a year already.
I don't think it has been fully a year yet,
Oh,
but
okay.
but we're close. It's getting there, yeah.
So without objection, we'll just use this form again. Okay, without objection. Then financial review.
We've had, you can see the August financials. I was hoping we get to September, but due to staff vacations and travel plans, we're still a week away from that. So this is August. September will be available soon. You've got the grant summary, the loan report, and the lease report. For some reason, I always work backwards on this when I talk about it. The lease report, even though it's showing one lessee behind, we are current now as we speak. Likewise, the loan had one small delay in payment. Every borrower is current as we speak today at the meeting. So those are in good standing. The August 2025 grant kind of disbursement schedule helps us look at that timeliness question with CDBG funding. We don't have the 2025 grants on here because we just received notice that we have access to those. So they will be coming on for the next statement you see, which includes all the recent action plan activities. We have a couple of projects that are still behind in spend down. And you can see at the very bottom that we're not where we need to be in terms of to be on schedule for timely expenditure by May 31st. However, the Cecil Malone sidewalks of $160,000 have been completed, as have the $70,000 for the Cherry Street missing segments. So there'll be $230,000 coming in expenditure, which will be very helpful towards getting us closer to where we want to be in terms of expenditures of CDBG funds once we receive the billing from the engineering division. So that's the good news that project's moving ahead. We have a couple of projects that are still slow. NISA's been doing a lot of work working with all the grantees, both the 2025 grantees, as well as the ones that were identified kind of as behind here. The big one at one point was the homeowner rehab project. There were 2 years of homeowner rehab. It looks like 2022 is going to be able to expend their full funds well before May, maybe not in the next month or two, and that it looks like the 2023 homeowner rehab will not be able to fully expend their funds, which leads us to another reprogramming opportunity. It's one way to look at it. Anissa's been doing a lot of work on this. I think I'd ask Anissa if she would kind of give us an update on her discussions with grantees and issues.
Yes, so we've been discussing with grantees such as Nels already mentioned, 2023 homeowner rehab expects to be able to complete 3 projects of the 6 that they were expecting to be able to finish. So we'll know more about that by the end of the month. We're gathering information from the slow moving projects and also looking out, surveying the landscape, talking to partners about what alternative projects there may exist to be able to reprogram funds to. Currently, without homeowner rehab, we expect a little more than $100,000 to be available for reprogramming. That includes up to $30,000 that's eligible for public services, and then we reach the public services cap. So after, if there are public services that want, if there are public services to receive reprogramming funds, then anything above that that comes back would need to be used for one of the other 3 projects, which is economic development, not likely, public facilities, or affordable housing. So we need to look at a number of criteria for reprogramming this year. The most important thing being not the most important thing, the most urgent thing being the timeliness measure. So we're looking for projects that are, a phrase I don't like is shovel ready, but ready to be implemented immediately or soon enough that the project could be fully or mostly reimbursed by the May 31st timeliness deadline. So that's one of the things we need to look at, the shovel readiness, whether or not the project that exists out there, and I've compiled a list of about 24 potential projects, but we also need to ensure that they would create low to moderate income benefits, that the NEPA review, which is the National Environmental Protection Act environmental review, would not be so burdensome that the project couldn't be completed in time. So most projects have a lower threshold, but there are some that are very big that probably cannot be completed in time. What else? Oh, and another consideration is anytime $25,000 or more is reprogrammed, or any amount of funding is reprogrammed to a purpose that kind of wasn't already originally identified, we need to go through the substantial amendment process, such as we did for Cherry Street project sidewalks, which means after the board approves it, it needs to go to public hearing, public comment, and common council adoption. So that's a lengthy process. So for all those reasons, we're kind of compiling all this data. We're waiting to hear from a few more partners about whether or not they'll be able to expend. So I expect that the 100,000 that I mentioned earlier will probably grow. And as you may remember from Nels's spend down workout plan, an average of $74,000 needs to be expended a month from our CDBG holdings.
So we're hopeful that we can bring something to a November, for the NI committee to start working on issues in November, early November, and that the agency consider some progress on the issue at its November meeting. Don't know who that is. So in our CDBG workout plan, we did talk with HUD about examining the issue in November, kind of a check-in to see where we are, and making some corrective measures if necessary to bring us online. One of the new things in the 2025 grant agreement that we received from HUD are some special additional requirements that were not imposed on prior grantees that are associated with some of the executive orders that have been issued. And it appears it may have a chill on some of our applicants going forward, so that it explains why there might be some organizations that are declining to accept CDBG funds in 2025. But we also have some projects where we just closely have looked at them and say, is it reasonable that you're going to be able to advance this project to an expenditure, in a timely way? And, asking that question, are you in position to spend the funds in a timely way? And if not, we're asking them to, helping them make a decision of whether they want to execute the commitment letter and proceed, because we're going to need to keep them on a timeline. So that's why we think we're going to have over $100,000 of CDBG funds to take a look at for reprogramming.
I just want to clarify, I totally understand the confines of this program, of the sort of plan that we're on, but I just want to understand, so there's two separate things going on. There's organizations that are years behind on their spend down, right? Like, for example, the one we're just talking about, the major rehab. But you're also talking about people that the committee approved with their proposals when we approved them in the spring,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And they're both being evaluated for being able to spend their money by May?
No, just the ones that were approved in the 2025 action plan, we're asking, are you in position to expend those funds within 12 to 18 months
Oh,
of
okay,
award?
okay.
Not, right, no, that's a
Okay.
good clarification. We're just trying to say, so timeliness means different things. If we're funded in 22 and 23, yes, we want you
Yeah.
to spend by May.
Yes,
If
okay.
you are funded in this year's action plan and you're looking at a commitment letter, the question really is, are you on a pathway to spend within a reasonable 12 to 18-month timeline?
Okay.
Um,
And so then the potential reprogramming of the, say, $100,000, that's all from like previous year programs that are not working out.
Well, we think we can identify some projects where they're not accepting the commitment letter, so that therefore that money would be available for reprogramming. You could choose to roll it into a future action plan competitive process, or you could act on it in an interim basis.
So now again, we are talking about people that we approve, people who are not signing the letter,
Right,
but that were approved in the spring.
right.
And now we're giving that money to people that have 12 to 18 months or have until May.
Probably 12 months would be, we would look, because we're burning time every month that we've going forward, we're burning some time, so we don't want to, if you think on average, we should be expending our funds on a 15-month schedule kind of to be in line with the spend down. But we know some projects take longer and some are quicker to implement. So we kind of think, we kind of set up our agreements to be 12 to 18 months for completion. We usually give 18 months. And that's worked reasonably well in the past. But you're right, if there's a project that was approved in the 2025 action plan and we're sending them a commit letter and they're not signing the commitment letter or declining it, essentially, then yes, I think we should take a look at whether we should reprogram it now or figure out whether we want to defer reprogramming it for 6 months, but that then leads us into kind of we're behind the
Oh, I
eight
don't
ball
mean,
then, yeah.
I don't mean defer reprogramming it. I'm just trying to get clarity on when we ask like a new eligible organization that we are identifying, that they will also have 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the May thing is primarily about these like old programs that have not that have not come to fruition.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the main thing is looking at that timeliness. Can we meet it or not, I guess, right? Because there's a mix of housing projects always take longer to develop than public service activities or, a sidewalk improvement program, typically, something like that. So we know we have to build a little timeline in for a project that's going to have 5 funding sources and get bank finance, all those things. So really, I think we need to think about it in a holistic way that come May 31st, are we going to meet the timeliness deadline given how we're moving, yes or no? But by and large, everybody should have at least 12 months to spend their funds when awarded.
Okay, thanks.
Can I clarify a particular point? I want to make sure I'm getting and giving the right information. So when we try to identify alternate projects that are shovel ready, Are you saying those should also have 12 months to 18 months to expend?
Kind of depends on whether we're talking about the old money or the new money. I mean, if it's from the homeowner rehab program from 2023, we probably want to find a project that can spend the funds relatively quickly. But
So the 100,000 that we were just talking about just right now, that is from 2025. This year's action plan, so not old money. That's the current year money.
So those new potential reprogrammed recipients would have to, like the 12 to 18 months plan.
Yes, and I think this gets into it. I don't know if this is helpful to discuss right now, so feel free to stop me. But if a new, I mean, there's the commitment letter issue for that, for those, that if an entirely new project is identified, they normally grantees have more than 45 days to sign their commitment letter. So then that would put the project behind kind of from a,
yeah,
go if it was entirely new and not shovel ready.
yeah, we've got to work out a timeline for new funding. Typically, when we adopt an action plan, we have a long time before the money is available because it has to be approved by HUD, and then they have to approve our action plan formally, and then they have to open up our account on the lock system so we can access the money. So typically, the action plan that was approved by the agency in May, approved by council in June, we don't have access funding until October 1st. But once we have access to funding, we can move quicker. And I think what Anissa is saying is that whole process of sending a commitment letter and waiting for the board to approve it is another 45-day, 60-day timeline. And we just have to keep that in mind, that that's another target that we have to be cognizant of.
Thank you.
Ideally, we'll find some reprogramming for a project that we think are very confident can be built before May 31st, but all the projects don't have to be done by May 31st.
Nels, you touched on this, that there may be some organizations, because of how they said they wanted to use the funds or what population they wanted to use the funds to serve, they may, because of HUD reporting requirements or restrictions, they may say, we don't want to take the funds now because we may have to, for whatever reason, if an organization still goes ahead and wants to take the funding, has HUD put any obligations on our agency or any agency that's then passing on the funds to take a look and make sure they comply with the HUD regulations? So that if an organization says, yes, we'll take the funds, we might say, well, no, HUD says you can't use it for that purpose. Are we required, or is it something we have in the back of our minds that maybe we should be looking at?
Well, ultimately, the grant goes to the city. The city is contracted with the IRA, and the IRA's agreement with the city is we will administer it in compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. So we do have an obligation to ensure that the funds are being used in a way that is in accordance and won't result in a finding or HUD saying you misused the funds and you need to pay us back the money. So we have an obligation overall to think about it that way. The new requirement that is in 2025 is an identification verification system for recipients of federal funds to show that they're legally in the country and not, it's an immigration kind of focused thing. And they have imposed a standard in the contract language related to that. Without truly clarifying how it works in practice. And of course, with the shutdown, there's no guidance from HUD staff about that. But essentially, they're trying to ensure that, and it appears that the IRA, as the grantee, would be the one that would have to bring forward and run individuals who are receiving, quote, federal benefits through an identification system to ensure compliance with that executive order. So it looks like there would be a role for us. We're not truly sure what that is because we don't have clarification. We just have the very framework that we are agreeing to comply with that requirement, which we don't have any choice. We either accept the grant funds or we don't. But in the future, it may very well influence which kind of projects we want to focus on and minimize our obligations in that regard. You know, just an example of that is if you do a sidewalk project in a neighborhood, there's no identification of individual beneficiaries. It's a neighborhood area-wide benefit, where some activities are, you can identify the individual beneficiaries. If you do a a for sale housing project, that homeowner is easy, identifiable. So that is an issue that I think we want to be cognizant of, but we don't really have a full understanding of how it works in practice yet. What is the threshold for having to do that identification check for the beneficiary of the federal funds?
So as far as we know, as of now, it will be for the 2025,
Yes.
but not looking back to previous years.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It's grant
Wow.
year by grant year.
So hypothetically, that means people who are on the receiving end of like security deposit assistance?
Potentially. Yes. It's unclear where our funds are being used to fund staff, whether that would trigger it. If we're funding staff for a limited clientele public service, would that trigger it? We don't know whether it's based on how we use our funds or whether it's based on the benefit of the program itself and at what threshold. I mean, the 211 program benefits a lot of individuals, but it's not practical to ask every 211 person to provide, their social security number or their green card identification, and then run that through a system. That just wouldn't be practical. So that's why we need some clarification from how this works in practice.
That's going to be for the programs that we already approved.
For 2025, yeah.
They should increase the funding so that we have staff to engage that work.
Right. When we get to the next meeting date on the agenda, hopefully we can pick a date that works for folks, because the usual IURA meeting would fall on a holiday.
You guys don't want to have Thanksgiving with me? Oh, that's cool. It's fine.
Just-
Whatever, I had plans anyway.
That would be to bring some reprogramming discussion in a better way forward with you to understand, and the options you have.
Well, we might get right to that because I don't really have much of a report other than to say, city budget process is
Advancing.
gonna be done by the legal requirement date under New York state law. Duxon, any report from you?
No report.
And any further report from staff?
No.
And does 9 a.m. on the 20th work for folks?
Third Thursday of the month.
It works for me, but I cannot stay past 10:30,
You'll
which
never
I,
twist my arm and make the
yeah.
meeting efficient? Oh, no. Great. Thank you for letting us know. And we'll check with Donna. Okay. With no other business, we are adjourned. Thank you.